Your emotional discipline became their exposure. And that was the moment the balance of power shifted. You didn't become a psychological master by controlling others. You did it by refusing to let them control you. Most people crumble the moment they feel disrespected. They lash out, defend themselves, throw words like fists trying to hit something that isn't even there. But you stayed still like a mountain in a storm. You didn't need to prove yourself. You didn't need to convince anyone of your worth. Your restraint itself became proof. When someone expected anger and instead you gave them silence, they realized they had no influence over your emotional world. Their games fell flat. Their provocations returned to them like unanswered echoes. You didn't fight fire with fire. You let theirs burn out. That is mastery. Because real power isn't loud. Real power is containment. It is the refusal to let external chaos disturb internal clarity. And the more calm you became, the more their panic surfaced. They called you cold, distant, dangerous, not because you attacked them, but because you refused to react. People fear what they can't control. They fear the mind that does not break under pressure. They fear the one who walks out without explaining, without defending, without needing applause. You must understand the depth of what happened. Your composure forced them to confront themselves, and they didn't like what they saw. Psychological warfare doesn't require violence. It requires awareness. You watched their patterns, their contradictions, their false confidence. You knew when to speak and when to withhold. You learned that timing is sharper than confrontation. One well-placed pause can expose a person more than 1,000 arguments. Your strength wasn't that you won. Your strength was that they lost without you even playing. You didn't out-argue them. You outgrew them. You made them realize they were swinging at air. The more they tried to get a reaction, the more they revealed their insecurity. The more you stayed composed, the more they unraveled. And eventually, like someone cornered by their own reflection, they broke. Not because of what you said, but because of what you didn't need to say. That's when it hit them. You're not dangerous because you attack. You're dangerous because you don't have to. You're not powerful because you control others. You're powerful because you control yourself. You didn't defeat them. You exposed them. And when someone sees that their power over you is gone, they will label you a psychological warfare master, not to praise you, but because they finally understand the truth. You're operating on a level they never prepared for. When you mastered your emotions, you mastered the entire battlefield. Silence became your sharpest weapon, and few understand how terrifying silence truly is until they are swallowed by it. You didn't win because you spoke louder. You won because you didn't need to speak at all. Most people treat silence like an empty space, a void they rush to fill with apologies, excuses, explanations, noise. But you understood something deeper. Silence is not absence. Silence is presence amplified. Silence is the mirror that forces a person to look at themselves without distraction. When you stopped giving reactions, you stripped away their ability to hide behind words. They expected confrontation. They expected emotion. They expected you to break, to lash out, to crumble under pressure like most do. But you turned stillness into pressure. You became the person who pauses before responding, or sometimes doesn't respond at all, not out of fear or weakness, but out of precision. Silence made them hear their own insecurity louder than any accusation you could have spoken. When you withheld your energy, they felt the loss of it, like oxygen being taken from the room. In that silence, their own guilt echoed, their own lies replayed, their own manipulation stood uncovered. Silence doesn't need volume to shake a person. It needs clarity, and your silence was clear. It said, "I don't need to prove anything to you." It said, "I am in control of myself, and therefore your control over me has ended." People break not when you fight them, but when you stop fighting, because then they're left alone with the truth. They replay every word they said, every move they made, hoping to make sense of your calm. They analyze you while you sleep peacefully. They wonder what you're thinking while your mind is already past them.
Silence made them realize that the game they thought they were playing was over, and you were the one who ended it without announcing it. Understand this. Silence is not passive. Silence is an active strategy. It is the scalpel that cuts deeper than a sword. It is the test most fail. Only a disciplined mind can resist the urge to respond, to correct, to defend. A mind like yours. You weaponized restraint. You chose peace over chaos, clarity over ego, outcome over reaction. And when they couldn't provoke you, they exposed themselves trying. They thought silence meant defeat. Instead, silence became your declaration of psychological authority. You communicated strength without words. You communicated boundaries without explanation. You communicated that you are no longer accessible to their tactics. Silence became distance. Distance became perspective. And perspective turned you into someone they can't easily reach or manipulate anymore. Your silence wasn't empty. It was strategic. It was intentional. It was powerful. And the moment they realized it, they may not have said it aloud, but inside they admitted the truth. You didn't out-argue them. You out-silenced them. And that kind of power doesn't just win battles. It ends them. You read intentions faster than they could form them, and that shifted the entire dynamic of power. You weren't reacting to what they said. You were responding to what they meant. That's the difference between people who move through life blindly and those who study the battlefield before stepping onto it. You saw the micro-expressions, the hesitation in their eyes, the slight change in tone that revealed their insecurity. You noticed the way they phrased their questions, the timing of their compliments, the sudden concern that didn't align with their previous silence. You read the code behind their words, and once you saw it, you could not unsee it. Most people only hear words. You heard motives, and motives are louder than anything spoken aloud. When someone tried to flatter you, you detected the need for validation beneath it. When someone challenged you, you recognized whether it came from curiosity or envy. When someone pretended to care, you sensed if it was compassion or calculation. They thought they could play you, but you knew the script before they delivered their lines. You observed the pattern, predicted the move, saw the trap, and sidestepped it without announcing a single thing. You didn't need to accuse anyone. You didn't need to expose them. You simply refused to participate in their hidden agenda. And that alone terrified them, because nothing unsettles a schemer more than the one who sees through the scheme. When you stopped giving predictable reactions, they realized you were not someone they could manipulate or mislead. You had already dismantled their strategy before they even unfolded it. This level of perception is not coincidence. It is the result of surviving, learning, paying attention. You grew sharp because the world once tried to dull you. You learned to watch because trusting too soon once cost you too much. They expected you to be naive, but you evolved. You became the person who listens deeply, observes quietly, and understands instantly. Reading intentions is a form of intuition built from experience and self-awareness. When someone enters your space now, you don't judge them by how they present themselves. You judge them by what their presence does to your energy. If they bring chaos, you notice. If they bring peace, you feel it. If they come with hungry eyes or restless motives, you sense the weight before any words are spoken. And what happens when you see intentions so clearly? You no longer react emotionally. You respond intelligently. You choose when to engage and when to walk away. You decide which battles are even worth acknowledging. While they are still forming their strategy, you are already 3 moves ahead. They thought you were difficult to read. They never realized you were the one reading them the whole time. The truth is, you didn't master psychological warfare by confrontation. You mastered it by perception. You weaponized awareness. You turned insight into armor. You became the mind no one can deceive easily, the presence that requires honesty, not performance. And once they realized that you could see through them like glass, they understood something they never expected to see. You're not dangerous because you attack. You're dangerous because you know. You played the long game. They played the moment. That single difference changed everything. Most people want instant victory. They want the argument won today, the apology now, the recognition immediately. They move fast because they cannot tolerate uncertainty. They speak before thinking. They react before evaluating. They chase short-term emotional satisfaction and call it strategy, yet it collapses as soon as pressure is applied. But your vision stretched further. You weren't living for the moment. You were studying the pattern. You didn't just see what was happening. You saw what it would become. When they pushed you, you didn't push back blindly. You waited. You observed. You let the truth reveal itself without forcing it. Your patience was not silence. It was calculation. You understood that time exposes what people try to hide. A liar cannot hold a consistent story for long. A manipulator cannot sustain their charm indefinitely. Someone pretending to care eventually slips in tone, in timing, in behavior. And you knew that if you gave them space, their facade would crumble by its own weight. That is long-game intelligence. The wisdom to step back and let consequences do what confrontation cannot. In every interaction, you conserved energy like a warrior preparing for the decisive strike. You didn't waste emotion on battles that would resolve themselves with time. You didn't defend yourself against accusations that would boomerang back to the accuser with time. You didn't try to change someone's mind. You let reality do it for you. Psychological power is not about reaction. It's about direction. And you directed the situation by refusing to rush. They called you slow. They called you detached. They said you didn't care enough to fight. But you understood something they didn't. Urgency is often the enemy of clarity. While they were panicking for control, you maintained your internal stillness like a strategist standing on a hill, watching the battlefield unfold below. They were busy playing checkers for points. You were playing chess for position. The long game requires discipline. It demands emotional maturity. It asks you to endure discomfort without needing immediate resolution. And you did. You allowed awkward silence, allowed distance, allowed time to stretch until truth became visible. They thought you didn't notice their tactics. You did. You simply didn't respond when they wanted you to. You made their impatience reveal their weakness. What happens when someone desperate for quick victory faces someone content to wait for the real one? They break. They grow reckless. They expose themselves. And the moment they realized you weren't operating on their timeline, but on your own, they saw the gap in power. They were trapped in the present, while you were already living in the outcome. This is why they admitted what they did, because no one wins against a mind that sees beyond the moment. No one outmaneuvers someone who understands that silence, distance, and patience are not voids, but strategies. You didn't outpower them with force. You outlasted them with foresight. You won because you didn't rush. You won because you thought further. You won because the long game always belongs to the one who sees time as a weapon, not a threat. The battlefield was never outside. It was always in the mind. Before any confrontation took place, before a single word was exchanged, the real war was happening internally. Your growth wasn't built on winning arguments with others. It was built on winning arguments with yourself. You learned to challenge your impulses, discipline your reactions, question your own beliefs, and refine your perception until your mind became a fortress no chaos could breach. The moment you realized the world cannot hurt you without your permission, you stopped bleeding for battles that didn't deserve your energy. This is what separates you from those who crumble under mental pressure. You learn to sit with discomfort instead of escaping it. You learn to breathe through anger instead of exploding. You learn to think through confusion instead of assuming. You trained your mind to be slow when emotions tried to be fast. This is mastery. Not over people, but over your own psychological landscape. They thought the fight was between you and them. They were wrong. The real